We all have different paths that we take as we're trying to deal with our aging parents. And sometimes it's hard to do, but sometimes you can make it very positive.
And I think that as we are learning ourselves, often we can share what we're learning with others. And today we have Sarah Smith, who has her caregiver journey that she's going to share with us today, and it led to a book as well. So I think you're a great example of sort of sharing what you've been through.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. And first of all, talk about what happened. And I kind of guess the background. Broken Beauty is the title of the book that you wrote. And we'll get to that in a second. But how did it all come about with your mom?
Well, my mom was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's around the age of 67. She had had it for a couple of years. We knew there was something wrong neurologically speaking. She had some tingling in her arm, was having problems writing. And we tried to get her to a doctor, but she just did not like doctors. So it took a couple years to go get some PET scans and do some tests. And so when they came back with the news of early onset, it was really devastating and heartbreaking because it never even crossed our minds. As a matter of fact, I had never even heard of it. So by the time they were able to assess her and do all the scans, they said to us, she's had it for several years for sure. So early onset is 65 or younger. Even though she was 67 at diagnosis, it had been probably 3 or 4 years in the making at minimum. So anyway, it was a really hard time, very close to my mom. I was living in Dallas. She was in Houston. And at the time, she had one sibling left, and most of her family had passed away young. And it was just a really challenging time for my dad too, because he was there by himself taking care of her. And the disease progresses so quickly. And especially the younger you are, it's very fast. And it really felt like from diagnosis, just she got so anxious and then tried to cover it up more and more, and it seemed to progress even more. And so it just gets really, really difficult on the loved one, the caregivers, the family. It's a lot of stress. And thankfully, my dad ended up moving to Dallas with my mom to be closer to us kids so that we could help take care of her.
And how did y'all deal with that? I imagine that when you got that diagnosis, it sounds like she was okay enough that she understood. So that's got to be really difficult when you actually are getting that diagnosis and oh gosh, and the hard part with Alzheimer's is that it goes one way. Yeah. You know what I mean? For the most part. So how did you kind of overcome the hurt and this, being scared and all of the things that probably there were so many emotions that were tied into that?
It took a really long time. I think when you first hear news like that, you go through shock. The stages of grief, I would say, shock and then denial. Then you're angry, you're sad. And I think the same goes for my parents. They went through the same thing. As a matter of fact, they were so shocked, they didn't even tell us for a little while, and felt like they, first of all, wanted to talk about it and maybe get their ducks in a row. I don't know, plan. But I think it was just such hard news to accept. And my dad had retired. They had plans to travel. So it really just was so hard for them to accept that news that they couldn't really share it with anyone at the time. So it took a while. And for me personally, just being in Dallas and not being in Houston, raising a young family, we had an elementary, our son was in elementary at the time, and we had 2 daughters in middle school. Actually, our middle daughter was also in elementary. She was in the 3rd grade. And I just think not being there and being the only daughter and being so close to both of my parents, I really fell into a spiral myself. I started going through sort of self-pity in a way of just feeling bad that my mom was feeling bad for her, but self-pity for myself that I couldn't really fulfill my duties. And then it became, you're not doing enough. Well, it was hard for me to do anything because they were in Houston. And once they moved here, I was able to do a lot more, but I would come home and just sob at night. And we did end up having to place her years later because she was a danger to herself. And really, my dad just could not do it anymore.
Mhm.
We had ran out of all options. And that really sent me into a place of isolation
Mhm.
and led to despair and depression,
Mhm.
and went through probably about 6 or 7 weeks of just not being able to get out of bed during the day, and
Mhm.
covering up myself, lying to Thad, my husband, of, he'd call and say, "How are you doing?" "Oh, great. I went to the grocery store, went and worked out." I did none of that. And it was really hard. And it wasn't until for me, my faith is really important to me and in our family. And what got me out of it was I finally just fell to my knees and sobbed and cried out to God, and didn't understand why, but I just knew that I could trust him to provide every need to help my parents carry this burden, but also balance being a wife, being a mother, being a child, being a daughter, being an in-law. And I had to just surrender trying to fix everything and trying to do what I could to make every memory last.
Mhm.
And once I did that, I feel like I got a different sort of perspective and saw things through a different lens, and began to step out of myself and really focus on how can I help love my mom and dad and help them live life to the fullest through this disease, however long it lasts.
Yeah.
And that began really a transformation and renewal of my mind
Mhm.
to
And,
get through it.
and what did the journey look like in some ways after that? Once you finally kind of got to this different place, what did it look like after that?
It just opened up so many opportunities, honestly. I feel like I hit a point where I started to go help mom. I would take her in carpool. We'd go to Starbucks. And once we placed her and went through my 7 weeks of despair, and I sort of snapped out of that, I was able to take our children to go see her.
Mhm.
And what it really looked like was so much love was out there that I just didn't even know we could experience.
Mhm.
And I think as a mother, you're also afraid to expose your children to their grandparent that they love so much, to them being around other people, especially for us being in a memory care facility. I mean,
Mhm.
they seem crazy to them,
Mhm.
and you're fearful that your loved one's going to say something horrible to your children or do something. But I overcame that and realized, if I don't expose our children and look at this as a service opportunity,
Mhm.
and they think life is easy, then I am doing a disservice for them.
Mhm.
And life is hard and it's challenging. And I wanted them to see that we can cope with our pain and our challenges and our trials with faith and be patient through it. And we need to give our time to help others feel joy and love, and also just that their life is valued. And
Mhm.
that was really important to me and Thad, was let's show our children that dignity matters, their
Mhm.
lives matter, no matter what the disease, whatever the disability is. And that wasn't just for my mom and memory care, it was for everyone around her.
Mhm.
And it really led to us taking their friends, and we would go at holidays and sing. We would
Mhm.
paint crosses with them for Easter, pass out treats. And we started to seize every opportunity we could to volunteer at memory
Mhm.
care.
Mhm.
And I mean, to see our children come alive and start thriving because they were giving
Mhm.
themselves, it just opened up um, a whole nother side of blessings and opportunities that I just had no idea
Yeah.
um, would come for us.
Yeah, that's just great. I think that what you had to go through, it sounds so easy because it's just changing your mindset from, oh, having a pity party to, okay, let's take a
Mhm.
positive approach to this. But it's hard to do, especially when it's a loved one,
Yeah.
especially your mom that you're so close to, that's going through this. So
Mhm.
any tips for people who are going through something similar about how to get over that bridge to have that positive attitude?
Yes, I mean, honestly, it's a choice, and I had to choose joy.
Mhm.
Had to choose joy to get out of isolation. And also realizing that if I don't choose joy and I don't put myself in their shoes of if I was sick, I would want to feel loved. I wouldn't want to feel lonely. And
Mhm.
so it was really changing my perspective of how will this make my mom feel today? And she may forget about it. And she did. There were times we would spend hours with her, and 30 minutes later, she didn't remember. But I knew that it was bringing her love and joy in that moment. So truly renewing your mind every morning, however that is for you. For me, it was memorizing excuse me, Romans 12:2. And it was a Bible verse just of, don't be conformed to the pattern of this world. And I was being conformed to fear. That was what was had a huge grip on me. And it, by the renewing of your mind, you will be able to discern God's perfect will and his pleasing will, and it transforms your heart. And so that's what happened to me. I started setting my alarm every hour and reciting that Bible verse for me.
Mhm.
And over time, it became a discipline.
Mhm.
And the next thing I knew, my mind was being renewed and my heart was being transformed. And I looked forward to going and serving. Now, were there days that I dreaded going? There were. I mean, I had a lot on my plate, but I every single time I left there with a smile on my face going, there's so much purpose through this pain.
Mhm.
And it was restoring my broken heart. So by serving and loving on her, my heart was also being restored. And I think people it's so important to find community, to not be afraid to share with your friends your feelings and to be authentic, to not be afraid to feel vulnerable. And when you do this, more and more people actually come out of isolation. I thought I was alone. And then when I showed up to do the walk to end Alzheimer's, I was surrounded by thousands of people.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you go to a memory care and you serve. And by the way, your loved one doesn't have to be in a memory care, to go serve. And
Mhm.
so you show up and you see all these other families who are struggling and going through the same thing. And what I noticed was the more we showed up and sang and danced,
Mhm.
other family members began to show up more, or visitors and
Mhm.
guests. And it's a ripple effect. I mean,
Yeah.
just having that positive mindset is
Mhm.
encouraging and building others up. And if you can choose joy and step out of yourself and really just have the courage, it's just the first step is courage. Um, and walk by faith. I promise you, it is so worth it. It really is.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I love that you said that it was a daily, maybe even hourly choice
Mhm.
that you had to make and be really conscious about that decision.
Yeah.
Yes, very much so. And it really, you overcome. I mean, you become an overcomer if you can do this daily, whatever that is. If it could be yoga or meditation for someone, for me, it was scripture and spending time with God, but it could be music for someone, or going on a walk and listening to a podcast. But renewing your mind daily and setting that before you step
Mhm.
into that role of caregiver and loved one to help, it's critical.
Yeah. And you wrote a book about it, and I assume that not only did that help you, but it's helping people who read it.
Yes, I've just been so blown away, and this goes back to coming out of isolation and finding out that you're not alone.
Mhm.
I am absolutely blown away by the responses that I've gotten, messages, emails of people who have said, "Oh my gosh, you have said everything I have felt." And my mom also tried to cut something out of her skin, or, it just the stories have gone on and on. And I'm so grateful that this journey has led for me to be able to share the story and all that it has done, for my mom and dad and our family, and restored relationships in our family, and that it's helping others. And I'm just so grateful for this opportunity to be able to share our story.
Well, because I do think that the more that we talk about things, and that was really the whole impetus behind parenting aging parents from the very beginning, was the
Yes.
fact that I was looking around and noticing that I was kind of accidentally finding out that a friend's mom had Parkinson's, or a friend's mom had brain surgery or was having other challenges. And it was only by accident because we don't talk about it. And really the whole, idea behind parenting aging parents is the fact that if we do talk about it, we can help each other. So you're such a great example of that. When you are willing to open up and share your experiences, it can absolutely help somebody else.
Thank you. And I'm so glad you are doing this. It's really needed out there. And again, yes, the more we talk, the more it helps people and builds our community online, Facebook, in your city, in your friend group. It does. It helps build community. And y'all are doing a wonderful thing by doing this. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And real quick about the book, Broken Beauty. It's called that because that's your mother's nickname, correct?
Yes, it is. So my mom, when she became a grandmother, she decided she wanted her name to be Beauty. She said, if I'm called Grandma, I'm going to feel old and feeble. And so she did everything in her power to teach the kids beauty. And at first, Frinsley, our oldest, would say booty, booty. And she's like,
you got to be careful.
She did. My mom stuck with it. And that is her grandmother name. And that is why this book is called Broken Beauty. Ron Hall, dear friend of mine, he wrote Same Kind of Different as Me. And the movie was based off of his book, but he helped come up with that title because we have seen so much beauty in our brokenness, and that is my mom's name, and she's so beautiful. And I will just say this, my dad has said that he's fallen in love all over again with a new woman. And it's a beautiful, beautiful love story. And there can be beauty in our pain. So that's where her name came from, and where
a lot of meaning is behind the title for sure.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Sarah Smith, great inspiration. Thanks so much for talking to us today. We really
thank you.
I think we learn a lot from things like this. Like I always say that when you're talking, whether it's my mom with Alzheimer's or anyone else, don't worry so much about what's missing. Love what's still there. And Sarah's a great example of that.
And I think that so much of this is true, no matter what the diagnosis or condition is, but just having to have that continued reminder of, I can choose joy, or I can choose something else that's not going to feel so good. Exactly. And it's not easy, but it's just a continual practice for sure.
Yeah. If you have any other topics you'd like us to discuss, let us know. Parenting Aging Parents.